which I think we have a theist. Mike in South Carolina wants to ask Justin a question. Wants to know if there are any books in the Bible that you think are true.
Well, I think that the question assumes that the contents of a book is completely true or completely false. But I think there's a lot of books in the Bible that are like purporting to tell historical events, and we can verify some of those historical events. But that doesn't mean everything in that book is true. Like we know in the book of 2 Kings, when it talks about the siege of Jerusalem, or we, read about in Isaiah chapter 8, and also in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles about the Assyrian armies coming in and invading the Ephraimite territories. We know that those things happened because we've got like writings from Babylon, writings from Assyria, Ashurbanipal, we have inscriptions from the palaces of Ashurbanipal and the other Mesopotamian kings showing Israelites, people from the land, literally being taken captive and people being flayed alive because war was pretty grisly back then. So like to say that everything in the book is true would be false, even though some things are true. For example, 1 Kings chapter 6 says that 480 years prior to the building of Solomon's temple, the Israelites left Egypt. The Exodus was then 480 years prior to that. Well, the beginning of the temple was about 970 BCE, which means that the Exodus had to have been in the middle of the 1400s. But it couldn't have been in the middle of the 1400s because it says in Exodus chapter 1 that the Pharaoh, they built the storehouses of Pithom and Ramses. And it says in the latter portion of Genesis that Ramses is most likely associated as the Pharaoh, but Ramses didn't live into the 1200s. He reigned from like 1279 to 1225. So there are some things in some of these historical books that are true, and there are some that are not. Do I believe that an angel of Yahweh came down and slaughtered a couple 100,000 people while the Israelites were sleeping, and they woke up in the morning and found all the dead bodies? No, I don't believe that.
So, Mike, are you with us?
Hey, I'm just taking it all in. Thanks.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but yeah, feel free to respond to Justin.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not as much a Bible scholar as Justin is, but I'm trying. You guys, I guess inadvertently, you kind of inspire me because you bring up stuff, and I'm like, oh wow, and I check into it, and so far, these things I've checked into. When you really dig into it, it makes more sense than the way at least it was presented. You do some superficial presentations. I'm not saying, I guess I am saying you kind of slant it in a certain way and then it sounds good and then you check into it. It's like, well, it could be, or it could be the way it is written kind of thing. So that's why I'm just looking at different instances. For example, Justin, I was listening to you on another show and you talked about the bear attacking those 42. We think they're kids. We don't know. That one.
It caused them.
What you presented it.
It caused them little children.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and even if it was like young men, because I have a pastor friend of mine who have talked on the phone about this with, and he'll say, "Well, it says like young men. It doesn't like he just does this move." And Justin, you're familiar with this person, but they make this kind of excuse, and I try to like, it's crazy to me because it's like, wait, so are you just now saying God like killed somebody for the baldy thing, and it like does this make it like this makes it okay now? I'm trying to understand your view. So I don't know why you want to make that move. It's like whether it's the children or it's God, having this like curse in the command of God for these bears to come out. Like I'm not really understanding like how that's a good thing.
Right, because they're definitely little children.
Yeah,
and they're behaving like little children. Right.
So they say get out of here, baldy. Like literally.
Yeah, and then what Justin said was, hey, if you had a bunch of kids bothering you, like in a classroom, would that be worthy of them getting mauled to death by bears? And then they're like, no, that's not entirely accurate as far as what happened. At least we don't know that it was children. And then also the fact there was 42.
Well, it does say they were children. The Hebrew word na'ar means youth, and katan in Hebrew, which is used there, means little or insignificant or very young. So they were children. So na'ar katan is a little child.
That we don't actually. it can be interpreted as that. It can also be interpreted, it uses those same words. That's why I dug into it. I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. I'm thinking 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds. But it referred to Solomon, the exact phrasing when he was 20 years old, when he took leadership as far as being king. So
Solomon refers to himself idiomatically as having the countenance of a young child. It's an idiomatic expression in the way that he's using it. He was definitely not described by the narrator as being a little child. He called himself like a little child.
And Mike, can I
I'm
ask
just saying that the words. Go ahead.
I just want to ask you. I'm just curious. We can get right back to this, but I'm over here in a different land right now, and like the whole conversation, and I'm sitting there thinking, if you we take your interpretation, do you think a good thing occurred? I'm just wondering what you think there. We just say it's young men or something. Does that make it okay?
Yeah. That doesn't sound good. Can I finish? But I'm going to agree with you, and then I'm going to explain. Can I explain after I agree with you?
Of course. Yeah. I just was making sure you were answering that.
The way it's presented. It's hey, somebody's insulting so-and-so. Okay, maybe they're 20 years old.
In fact, what we'll do, if the producers can, real quick, Mike, if the producers can, if they have it ready, we'll even give you a minute and you can go interrupt it on it. And what just for everybody, we're about to have somebody defend this obscene slaughtering with bears that were commanded in the curse of God. And we've changed it now to young men, but now we're going to show him justify and say why it's a good thing. Go ahead.
Okay, I just did a simple search of this, and it says the Hebrew adjective quatan means small, little, or young. And then we're thinking, how young is this? And then it's the same. It actually is narkotan. That means little kids maybe, but it also refers to Solomon when he was 20 as a narkotan. It's NA-whatever-ARQATAN. So you got Solomon as a 20-year-old. You got Hadid the Edomite. That's 1 Kings 11:17. Same thing. He was a mature rebel, but he was called same thing, narkotan. So we got an age issue. We got a number issue as well. 42 were killed. That means there were more than 42. It's this is a mob. Also, the geography it was right around Bethel, which was, they were praying to Baal. So these refer to them being servants. Yeah, so he could have been hit by a mob of a bunch of priest servants that were young, and they're mocking him, and then he's like,
I didn't actually in 2 Kings 24:25, I think it is. Is that right? It's off the top of my head. Is that right, Justin? 2
Kings 2:24 and 25.
2:24. That's right. I didn't read that part in there. Could you show me where it explicitly says that, or is that just you, Mike, adding this shit in there?
He's definitely adding it. Yeah.
Yeah, because this just sounds like a whole bunch of horse shit to me.
I'm adding this stuff in. I'm adding this in just I did a simple search on, hey, could you explain this a little bit? And
okay. So let's just be clear. The text doesn't say it, but Mike, let's just be clear. The text doesn't say it, right?
Well, the text says narkotan, and the question is,
okay, I'm not on that. Look, I don't know why you're on that. I don't know why you're on that. I want to get back to that. I do, but I'm sitting there going okay, let's just give you all the toys to play with, right? It's young men, or it's a man, or whatever. It's an old dude. Okay, I want to know how you justify this curse in the name of God, where these bears come out and maul these people. You're trying to justify that to me, right? But then in your justification, you just sounded like you just brought a whole bunch of stuff that's not explicit in the Bible, right? This doesn't sound like you're doing any critical biblical analysis here. It's just kind of the analysis of Mike to make it fit because I already believe this. That's my impression as somebody who doesn't believe this stuff. Could you understand my perspective?
Yeah,
or do I sound wild?
This is when I first heard it, I was like, hey, I think Justin's got a point. God was harsh. And then you do the research and you find out he was right next to where it could have been a bunch of priests worshiping Baal, and then they came out to harass him, and who knows what else. the fact that there's 42, if there's 4, this would make a lot of sense.
They could have been worshiping anybody. I don't really understand how that's like warranting to just like having those actions take place. But regardless, you keep saying it could have been, right? But there's nothing. So what you're actually telling me implicitly is it's not the case that I could justify this because I'm saying it could have been the case. I'm not saying it's likely the case based on like this evidence or like maybe what like scholars might use, right? It's like, okay, well, we have a good reason in antiquity to think that this could be the case because of that. It just sounds like you're just kind of like just saying words. Like I don't know why I would believe you.
This isn't my research. This is I looked it up on 1517.org, and somebody wrote a paper on it. This isn't me. And okay, I was like, wow, what happened? And it's like, yeah, you would have been right next to you.
No, I understand. I understand you've taken it out. I understand you've taken it. I want to pass it back to Justin. I just was really kind of struck by this point because I talked to like a pastor friend of mine, and he's done this thing where it's not a really young boy, and I'm like, I think there's an issue there. That's definitely Justin's territory, right? But like, let me just grant that and like move forward and see how you like. Because like you have this holier than thou morality, and I'm trying to understand this, right? I'm just this peon trying to understand this like top tier, top dog morality, and I'm seeing like these bears getting sent for people like worshiping some other thing. I've yet to see something like egregious that like warrants these bears being fucking sent at them. So I'm like not really sure what it just seems odd to me, man. I don't think that anybody in their right mind could justify something like this I don't think that somebody in their right mind could sit here and justify something like this unless they believed in some religion. That's like the only way people do this.
Yeah. And this is not actually an isolated incident. God sends lions on people elsewhere that hardly did anything wrong. We can get to that next. So what we have here is in a text is we have clearly a group of little children being little children. You could even call them teenagers. I don't care. And the fact that they were making fun of this man, I don't think at all would warrant them being mauled by bears. They posed no imminent threat to this person. They did no bodily harm to this person.
We don't know that.
We do know that because the text says that they're little children. Are you afraid of little children?
No. I'm afraid of 20-year-olds, a gang, teenagers. Yes.
You'd be deathly afraid if they were calling you bald. You'd be like shuddering in your boots.
That's what was recorded. We don't know what else happened. That's what I'm saying is we don't know the full story.
Right. So you're going to add stuff to it to make it more palatable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If you just add stuff that you like to the story to make it more powerful, you can make any story plausible.
Yeah.
I can add stuff to it too.
We're really good. Humans are really good at lying to themselves. We're really good at that.
Let me add something to the story. As it turns out that just before they met Elisha, these boys ran by a guy who was bald and it was making fun of all the kids for being kids. And so next time they saw a bald guy, they called him Baldy and made fun of him back because they were a little upset about their previous encounter. See how adding stuff to the story can make things go either way?
I'm not trying to add anything to it. This is a possibility. Only one possibility was presented. It's like little children called this guy name and then he had him killed. And that doesn't sound right.
Well, they're described as little children in the narration. And it's not being described as an idiomatic usage. In 2 Kings chapter 2, when Solomon refers to himself as a little child, he also says, was it 2 Kings chapter 2? Sorry, it wasn't 2 Kings chapter 2. I forget where it is. Chapter 3, 1 Kings chapter 3. He calls himself a little child, and he says, I don't even know how to come in and go out. Do you think that King Solomon didn't know how to come in and go out? Or do you think that maybe this is an idiomatic usage of the phrase so that he's essentially demeaning himself before his God? He's lowering himself before his God. This type of groveling is typically how people interacted with both kings and divine entities. You lower yourself as much as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's why if you read the Amarna tablets, you'll see people addressing the Pharaoh. There's a bunch of Canaanite city kings, petty kings, that are addressing Pharaoh because they're in need of chariots and archers to fight off the brigands that are in the land. And they start almost all of the letters by saying, I bow on my face on the ground before you, 7 times on my face, 7 times on my back. I am the dirt between your toes. This is how you address people in the ancient world, is you diminish yourself and you ingratiate yourself to the person or the being of much higher status. So when King Solomon is talking here about himself not even knowing how to come in or go out and being like a small child, you're not supposed to read the text and think that he actually was a small child. This is an idiomatic usage. And you just have to read the text for what it says and not read some goofy website trying to justify God sending bears to kill a bunch of kids.
Well, how many is a bunch?
I don't care how many there are. They're kids.
I cannot believe that was asked.
Not only are they kids, but they didn't cause any harm to the individual. They made fun of the individual.
We don't know that.
And like you find this, you find this hard to believe. You said earlier you find this like hard to believe it would be that case. Like, do you not know like that God's commands to slaughter like Amalekite children in 1 Samuel 15:3? This is like par for the course, bro. I don't understand this. Like, how is this news? Like, this is expected on the God hypothesis that you endorse.
Well, at first glance, it looks like just a couple of kids, and then you're like, "Holy crap, 42!" And then how old were they?
What are you talking about? They literally went. They went and slaughtered all of the Amalekite infants. How many do you think that is? You think that's more than 42?
We're back.
Yeah.
The Amalekites. Have you got anything besides Amalekites? Although you're saying they were innocent. I didn't want to get into the Amalekites.
They're babies. Yeah, they're fucking innocent. They're infants. Yes, they're innocent. You think that the infant was guilty of something? What crime? What did they do?
He bit that nipple a little too much.
I will look up the Amalekites, and then I'll have an answer for you. I will next time
Okay.
God sends animals to plague people who have done only minor infractions all the time. In 1 Kings chapter 13, there's a story of a prophet who goes out to deliver a word of condemnation, and God tells him not to eat or drink or to dine with anybody while he's out. And so he goes out, and on his way back, another prophet of God meets him and said, "The Lord sent me to tell you to dine with me tonight, to stay with me, accept my hospitality." And so he goes, "Okay, it sounds legit." He goes back with the guy. The next morning, God says, "Oh, you really fucked up now." He sends a lion to go kill his own prophet because his prophet was listening to one of the other prophets. This is not a God that is like looking out for mankind. The God that is described in the Bible is vengeful against mankind. In fact, in Deuteronomy, he literally says, "As I delighted in glorifying you, I will also delight in bringing harm to you." I can grab that reference.
God. I mean,
Yeah.
Justin, I actually was curious if you had a top one or two things that made you like, "I'm done. I am done." I'm just curious for Justin.
Yeah, great question. But before I answer that, the verse I was referring to was because people are going to ask Deuteronomy 28:63. God says, "Just as I took delight in making you prosperous and numerous, so the Lord will take delight in bringing you to ruin and destruction." So God literally takes delight in ruining his own people. But that presents a contradiction because Ezekiel says that I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. We can move on to that. The thing that took me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, was studying the Old Testament and reading what it actually says about the Messiah, and realizing that not only did Jesus not fulfill any of those messianic expectations, not even one, the ones that are ascribed to him in the New Testament are just out of context quotations. Half of them aren't even prophecies. Some of them aren't even quoted correctly. Some of them are quoting texts in contradiction. And you really have to like bend credulity to look at these and say, "Oh yeah, that was even a prophecy," much less the ones that are prophecies aren't even fulfilled. Zechariah 9, that is a legitimate prophecy. But if you bothered to read verse 10 after verse 9, it says that he's going to cut off the war horse from Ephraim and the battle bow. He didn't cut off any war horses. He didn't cut off any battle bow. He didn't command the nations and collect Israel and bring them back to live in the land in safety. That's what the king is supposed to do. That's what the Messiah is supposed to do. So until he sits on the throne, he is not the Messiah.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like the Jewish aspect, which is Jesus didn't come in as a leader and a warrior, but he is supposed to come back and be a leader and a warrior. Well, he'll be in control of the world when he comes back, says the Bible.
Right, but he was supposed to do that when he was here the first time.
Yeah.
And he's not the final sacrifice, because the same prophets that predicted him coming declare that there's going to be offerings and sacrifices of Moses still happening when he comes back. Ezekiel 45 says it. Jeremiah chapter 33, Isaiah chapter 56, verse 21 says that there's going to be priests and Levites in the new heaven and new earth. They're going to be giving offerings and sacrifices forever, according to Jeremiah 33. So this idea that Jesus was the final sacrifice doesn't line up with what the Old Testament actually says. Verse 17 of Jeremiah 33 says, "Thus saith the Lord, David shall never lack." David's the Messiah here in this passage. "David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to make grain offerings, and to make sacrifices for all time." This is incompatible with the New Testament view of Jesus Christ as being the final sacrifice, according to Hebrews chapter 7, and replacing the Levitical priesthood with his supposed priesthood of Melchizedek.
So you're saying there's going to be sacrifices in heaven?
That's what the Bible says, yes.
There's no reason. There's no reason.
I know.
When they say for all time, they mean all time on earth. I mean, it sounds
you
like
found the contradiction
on earth, and then
yes.
heaven. There's
you found the contradiction.
Meaning in heaven as well. I'll take a look at it. Jeremy 33:17.
Jeremiah 33. You can also go to Ezekiel 37 and Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66:21 says, "I will take some of them as priests and Levites, says the Lord, for as the new heavens and the new earth I will make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. From new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord." And if you go to Isaiah 56, he describes what that looks like. The foreigners who joined themselves to the Lord, he says, they will bring their offerings and sacrifices into the temple, and they'll be welcome in the temple just like the Gentiles, as long as they hold fast to his covenant. And so we have no indication in the Old Testament whatsoever that the offerings and sacrifices are going to go away. If you go to chapter 40 of the book of Ezekiel, you'll get the vision for the new heaven, new earth, the new Jerusalem, in fact. And it talks about the offerings and sacrifices that are going to occur in this new realm when we have the new Jerusalem. And even says the prince is called the Messiah here in the latter half of Ezekiel, says the prince himself will join with the Israelites in offering the burnt offerings, in offering the grain offerings. So this idea that because Jesus came, the sacrifices are going to cease simply isn't true. And the book of Deuteronomy says that the law is forever. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, and Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, and also elsewhere in Deuteronomy, it says that this law you will obey all the days that you live on the earth. So the New Testament stands in stark contradiction to everything the Old Testament ever said about the end times.
And that was your primary beef. You're like, hey, look, this doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Contradictions. Gotcha. All right. I could talk to you a lot, but I got to do some research. You guys refer me on. Hey, do me a favor and go after like Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
We want to talk about any beliefs people, any God claims that people have, or kind of supernatural claims, spiritual claims from more of my previous background. Those are the stuff I'm interested in. So I'll take it from any stripe. But Mike, it sounds like you're looking into this, and we do appreciate that you're coming back with different stuff to talk about. So thank you. Even though I wildly disagree with the kind of moral positions that both of us have, but that would be a different conversation. And speaking of,
JMike, just so I can do for my homework for you, JMike, it's you got a moral problem with God, right? You think he kills people?
No, I've never believed in God. I've never been a Christian. I mean, like my spiritual phase might have been weird with like a pantheism thing. I don't really know how to distinguish that. It wasn't really well thought out, so it's not really worth thinking back on in a sense. But no, mine has anything to do with that. In fact, I criticize a lot of atheists that I talk to online that will do this emotional move where it feels like there's a better route to go than to do that, to get that person to kind of go. So sometimes like I don't like that tactic depending on how it's doing. But yeah, like when I hear that there's a justification for like the children killing children, or me and Justin are stuck on the unaliving thing, so it's like really hard to say the word out loud without feeling like
I know
it's
TikTok has ruined our vocabulary.
the stream's gonna get taken down immediately, and then everyone's like, "What happened?" But yeah, anyway, so I think when we put it in like this kind of framework, for me, it's like I can obviously show someone my like moral frustrations there, but no, I've just never accepted the proposition that God exists, like a lot of other people probably listening, or they come to the position that they just don't believe God. And then mine went further. It just went, well, I think that there are better like philosophical arguments that explain the world around us, and they deal more with like an indifference than some type of intention. So I'm more on the indifference type of route than I am some guided intention. I've always been kind of keen to that view. It just makes more sense to me. So no, not an emotional thing, but you know, I do think that God is the God that you believe in, I think is a horrible, I was going to say something, but I'll say he's a horrible person. We'll just leave it there. All right.
No,
Mike, thank you so much.
I mean, if he does exist.
Well, I think he'd be a horrible piece of shit, but you know, I might be, you know, just piling it on right now. And I don't want to do that to you, because you sound like you're reading into this, and that's very important. So I don't want to stray you away from that.
No, it's all good. It should withstand skepticism, and that's why I find it really interesting that people were Christians and they're not, and then people aren't and then they are. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I find that fascinating too.
That's all I got.
So I agree. I 100% agree. As someone divorced from that, I find that very fascinating. Thank you, Mike, for your time.